Hey boys and girls, welcome to Levy School. All right, well, welcome back to Levy School, everyone, where we answer all the most common questions, address all the most common concerns, and hopefully clear up some of the most common misconceptions regarding school levies in general, more particularly the levy that'll be up for Anthony Wayne schools on the November 5th ballot. The question for Levy School today is, why does Anthony Wayne need more money? Yes, you, ma'am, my only student.
Yes, we all were wondering. It seems like houses are popping up like pimples on a preteen. And so if Anthony Wayne generates its revenue from property taxes, shouldn't we be sitting pretty?
That's a great question. And I can entirely understand that perspective. You know, you drive around Anthony Wayne, you see $500,000 homes popping up all over the place, and it's natural to think, shouldn't the coffers be overflowing? But the numbers tell a different story. So 11 years ago, when Anthony Wayne last passed a new operating levy, it was generating about $35.5 million per year in operating revenue through local property taxes. Today, 11 years later, that number is about $45.7 million. So over the last 11 years, the amount of operating revenue paid to the district has gone up about $10 million, and that's great. Unfortunately, expenses have gone up more quickly. So 11 years ago, the district was spending about $34.5 million a year. Today, that number is closer to $47.5 million. So even though we've generated $10 million more in revenue per year from 11 years ago, the district is now $13 million roughly more expensive to operate. Now, if the average person, average household is spending about, let's say, $3,000 per year in property tax to the district. I think the average is actually a little under that, but for the sake of it, let's say it's $3,000 per year in property tax to the district. To compensate for that $13 million difference, you would have had to have had, or we would have had to have built over the last 11 years, 4,333 homes to pay for that $13 million expense increase. Now, I know you drive around and you see a bunch of new homes and you think, man, we've added a lot of homes, and we've added some homes, but we haven't added 4,333 homes. In fact, we've only got about 12,000 homes in the entire district. So the district did not grow by 35% in the last 11 years. I don't know that a lot of people know this, but the per head cost or per pupil cost to educate a student in Anthony Wayne each year is about $13,500. Now, that probably sounds like a lot. Again, public education is an expensive value. That number is actually $2,000 less than the state average and lower than every comparable district in Northwest Ohio, except for Sylvania, and I think Sylvania is like $10 less. So comparatively speaking, Anthony Wayne is super efficient with the money it has. But because the per head cost to educate a kid per year is about $13,500, if the average home is spending about $3,000 a year in taxes, you're talking about an almost 4 to 5 house to student ratio. In other words, it takes between 4 and 5 houses of tax revenue to educate one kid per year. We just don't have that kind of volume in our community. So it's good news that, yes, our revenue has gone up by about $10 million. The bad news is that expenses have gone up faster. Yes, ma'am, you have another question or comment?
Yes, okay. So why don't we just cut the costs? Why don't we just, buy Angel soft tissue paper, toilet paper instead of the expensive stuff? Or why don't we just add water to the coffee creamer as a district to cut costs?
It's a good idea, right? I think anybody who pays taxes to a school system, any public entity, should expect that public entity to be as efficient as it can be with its dollars. The district has actually cut about $2 million from its general fund already. And we here at Levy School want to tip our cap to the new administration and the new school board for listening to voters, for making some cuts, and for continuing to monitor the district's expenses so that we can continue to make appropriate cuts as we sort of move forward. We're going to talk about the cuts that have been made and the cuts that will probably have to be made if this levy doesn't pass. We'll talk about that in a future Levy School video, but what you're going to see in that video is that while the district is trying its best to trim fat, we're not going to be able to close the funding gap, the operating deficit, by cuts alone. At least not without cutting into services that are related directly to student engagement in the classroom. I mean, here's the deal. The vast majority of our expense increases over the last 11 years are tied to our staff. They're tied to salaries and benefits. The average salary in Anthony Wayne is about $11,000 more than it was back in 2013 when we passed the last operating revenue increase. Every employee in the district that has been here for that entire time is 11 years more experienced and therefore 11 years more expensive. Now, in addition to that, there's obviously been increases in utility costs and in fuel costs for buses. So you put all of that together, costs have simply gone up faster than revenue, and most of those costs are tied to people. So eventually, as the district makes cuts and it's trimming what you might want to call fat, it's not going to be long before we start trimming muscle and eventually before we hit bone. Because most of our expenses are tied to the actual humans who are in the classroom educating kids. So again, look, the purpose of this video was to address the question, why does Anthony Wayne need more money? It's actually a two-part answer. This was the first one. We'll address the second part of it in our next time together. But we just want to acknowledge at Levy School, we get it. Tax increases are difficult. They put a burden on us. Nobody in the school system wants to come to the community and ask for more money. The reality is we just are in a place where expenses have outpaced revenue. And so the district is approaching the community for increased operating revenue because it needs it. Now, as we say every time we're together, we're grateful for the sacrifices that people made to give us an education, and we feel a sense of responsibility. It's our turn to do the same. We hope that you feel the same way about that. If you do, join us in voting yes for this operating levy on November 5th. Thanks for attending. We'll see you back here next time for another episode of Levy School, where we'll continue to have this conversation about why Anthony Wayne needs more money.